Hello everyone and welcome back to the Opera Euro Rapid quarterfinals. It's the second day of the match, Daniil Dubov versus Magnus Carlsen, and yesterday Magnus really just mopped the floor with Dubov. He crushed him out of the... they didn't even get to play the fourth game because Magnus only took 3 games to eliminate Dubov by winning 2 games and drawing 1. And now Dubov needs to do the same. He needs to win day 2 in order for them to go into... into tie breaks. So without further ado, let's check it out, as it's quite a wild game. So Dubov with the white pieces opens with d4. We have knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, and d5. We have the queen's gambit declined. We have g3 by Dubov, and now bishop to b4 with check. We have bishop to b2 blocking, and Magnus goes back bishop to e7. We have bishop to g2, and now both players castles. So castles, and now this position has been reached many times before. Magnus even had it against the Ding Lira, and he played knight b to d7 against the Ding here, and a lot of other moves have been played in this position. But the move Magnus played has never been played before, and that is a5, and it is already as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Dubov deals with this. And Magnus took some 3 minutes on deciding what to play here. So quite a lot, as it's still, the first few moves of the opening. So queen to c2, and now c6, strengthening the center. We have rook to c1 by Dubov, and now comes knight b to d7. So just continuing development, bishop to f4 by Dubov, and now knight to h5, challenging the bishop here. So Dubov goes back, and Magnus says, alright, I have the black pieces, I'm very happy with the draw, I already won the first match, so knight h to f6, and this is definitely the correct idea. Dubov goes back, bishop to g5, and now Magnus doesn't repeat, rather he goes h6 first, bishop to f4, and now again knight to h5. So you cannot go bishop to g5 next time the knight retreats. So here bishop back to e3 by Dubov, and Magnus again goes back, knight h to f6, asking what is your plan here. So Dubov goes back, bishop to f4, and now again knight to h5. Magnus doesn't care, he just goes back and forth. And here bishop to e5, and already the situation on the clock is very interesting. Dubov is down to 10 minutes and Magnus is down to 9 minutes. We have knight h back to f6 by Magnus, so this is like the 4th time he moves the knight back and forth. Knight to c3, Dubov finally continues development, and now knight captures on e5. We have d captures, and knight to d7 going after the e5 pawn. We have captures on d5, e captures on d5, and now rook to d1, and now queen to b6 by Magnus. So the queen is very nicely developed. However, here comes e4. And now what do you play here? Well, you could of course capture, and then the knight just improves the position, but here Magnus goes for d4, and he says my development is much better, and it's going to be very dangerous for you to capture this pawn. But you don't actually win material, because if you capture with the knight, then the knight can capture on e5, and if you capture with the rook, so the knight keeps defending this, you still capture on e5, because the knight cannot capture, queen captures rook. So here you would have to play rook a to d1 to defend the rook, but now we would see something like captures, and queen c5, and then the game continues with black having just an excellent position. So here, after d4, we have knight to e2 by Dubov. He doesn't grab the pawn, he wants to keep his e5 pawn there, and now bishop to c5 by Magnus. Queen to c5 was a bit more straightforward, but he goes for bishop here, with ideas of maybe pushing the pawn, going for bishop captures on f2. So now knight to f4, now the queen guards the f2 square, and now rook to e8 by Magnus. We have rook 8 to c1 by Dubov, and you can see now that Dubov basically completed his development, whereas Magnus still has to figure out what to do with the light square bishop and the rook on a8. And here, although you could play this in a lot of different ways, Magnus goes for d3, and this is super dangerous because, what are you gonna do? E6 is a pretty big idea at some point. The knight cannot capture because the bishop here is hanging. So what can you do here? If this pawn moves, then ideas even like rook captures here, followed by queen captures bishop, are possible. So Magnus has to be very careful, and he could in fact go for something like knight captures on e5. It is possible, and after giving up the bishop, queen captures and rook captures go for this bishop to g4 idea with a double attack on the knight here. And then, of course, if knight captures, then you lose the rook on d1. So here we would see rook captures on e5, rook captures, and now rook captures on d4, followed by rook to c5, and the game continues with white being better, as white has 2 knights for a rook. So of course, that's much better. But Magnus doesn't like this. He decides to go for d3, and this is now an incredibly complicated position. Dubov has to figure out how to deal with it, and Dubov decides to capture the pawn with the knight, and he plays knight captures on d3, which is not the absolute best way to capture. Rook captures is much better. The thing is, he was probably afraid of knight captures on e5, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you have rook to b3, and then you're just winning, because the queen is under attack. If the queen once you react to this, the bishop will fall, and there just aren't all that many good moves here for black. You could capture on f2 with check, but then we would just trade. Queen captures, we would see queen captures, king captures, and now knight to g4 check. But again, it's not much to look at. The white is up a piece, and it's just a better position. So this was possible. However, Dubov decided to capture with the knight, saying that, okay, now I have a triple attack on the bishop, but Magnus just goes back. Bishop to f8, and now knight to d2, going for knight to c4 with an attack on the queen. So Magnus quickly goes queen d4, and now knight to c4. And now comes knight to b6, offering a trade of these knights. And now the situation on the clock is that they are both down to 3 minutes. So here, knight to d6 by Dubov, giving up a knight, or rather giving up a pawn, and it's very interesting what happens now. Bishop captures on d6, e captures, and queen captures. So Magnus wins back one of the pawns, but now knight to c5. And again, what do you play here? Magnus goes for the queen to c7 idea, getting away from the rook here, and then now comes rook to d4. Dubov just defends the pawn once again, and he prepares to double up. So here, knight to d7, Magnus offers a trade, rook c to d1, and now knight captures on c5, queen captures, and finally Magnus solves all of his problems and goes bishop to e6. And now that the light square bishop has been developed and the other rook can come into the game, he can simply trade everything off. So a3 by Dubov, and now rook 8 to d8. So definitely a couple of great opportunities missed so far by Dubov. So here we have f4, charging forward with those pawns, and b6 by Magnus. Queen to c3, and now even c5, pushing that rook back. We have e5 now. The rook cannot be captured just yet because the queen will be hanging. So here, rook captures on d4, rook captures, again, the rook cannot be captured, and the rook to d8. And here, Dubov just trades it off, captures, and now bishop to f3, saying that, okay, maybe I'm going to be able to push those pawns a little bit in the future, but Magnus now consolidates on the king side. The g6 with h4 and h5 now, both players with the light square bishop, so it's not going to be easy. We have king to f2, Dubov starts improving the position of his king, and now b5 by Magnus. Very tricky idea. And even though the material on the board is completely equal, Magnus has 3 pawns on the queen side, whereas Dubov has 2, and that's being up a pawn on one side of the board, and it's definitely Magnus who is pushing here. So here, you don't want to capture the pawn. If you capture the pawn, then black just delivers check and wins back the pawn and retains a better position. Now he's going to create a pass pawn. It's going to be probably a very, very easy win for black. So instead, Dubov goes for bishop to e2. Bishop to e4 was somewhat better because you would have a lot more counterplay towards the king side. But okay, bishop to e2, and now comes b4 by Magnus. Queen to b6 was a little bit better, but I think Magnus was also playing on Dubov's time here. So here we have b4 by Magnus, immediately starting to advance those pawns, but now Dubov just captures the c5 pawn. We have queen captures, and now queen to d2. Magnus is going for some very, very sneaky ideas here with bishop to g4. So now queen captures on a5. Dubov says you've got nothing here, and indeed it's very interesting. Bishop to g4, now threatening to capture the bishop here. We have queen to a8 with check, king to h7, and now queen to e4, defending the pawn here, and now b3. And now Magnus pushed this pawn all the way. He's ready to capture the pawn on b2 now and promote his pass pawn. And there is only one move for Dubov that doesn't lose the game here, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the only not losing idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's e6. E6 is extremely strong because you have to react to it. If you don't react, then just, I mean, you get a queen into the game. And other than that, you clear the e5 square for your queen. And that's the only way you can defend the b2 pawn. So here, it doesn't matter what black captures with. Dubov captured with the bishop. So bishop captures here. And now queen to e5, guarding the b2 pawn. And now not a lot of ways for black to break through. Bishop g4, again, putting the pressure on the bishop. King to f1, now unpinning. We have queen to c1 with check, king to f2, and queen back to d2. Dubov again unpins, queen to c1 check, king to f2, and queen to d2, and it was in this position on move 53 that the players agreed to a draw, or rather there's a threefold repetition going on, so there is no way for either side to make progress. So definitely a shame for Dubov. He gained the upper hand here against Magnus, and he had a few positions where he could have played better and go for the win, but it's super complicated. You're very low on time, and Magnus is just very strong in chess. Tough luck for Dubov in game 1. We'll see what happens in the other 3. Can he catch up to Magnus, or will this be another day for a Magnus win? That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Enrico Salami, Narashiman Raghavan, Tito Reynaldo, Justin Pollard, and David Kimber for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice event, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.